Welcome to the Spirit-Filled Leadership Podcast. I'm Pete Barak. This is a podcast where we believe the world needs disciples and disciples need Spirit-filled leaders. So every time that we record one of these, our mission, our effort, our intention is to help you grow as a Spirit-filled leader. And what's a Spirit-filled leader? Somebody who's abiding with the Father, becoming like the Son, and living in the power of the Holy Spirit, recognizing that the Spirit of God has been placed in your heart, not just for your own sanctification, not just for your own holiness, but to launch you on mission and equip you to go and make more disciples, to be part of a disciple-making process in your community, in your family, wherever the Lord has placed you. And so every time we come together for this podcast, we want to help you take one more step in what it means to not only grow in the Spirit-filled component of it, but to grow in leadership. Because, as John Maxwell says, everything rises and falls with leadership. It was the mission method of Jesus to create men and women in his DNA, to disciple them, to be him once he was gone. And then once the Spirit of God came on Pentecost, they were able to be launched and replicate what he had done in them in others. And that's what we're trying to do. I know it's been a little while since our last episode. I apologize for that. Life has been full of many wonderful things and some not so wonderful things, but either way, we're back. We got fresh content for you. I hope you enjoy it. Please, as always, like, subscribe, share, do anything, make a comment. It helps just get the word out when people actually engage with us, not just view it. So if you feel inspired to write a review, to click on how many stars you think this is worth, or to share it with a friend, that certainly gets the word out and helps us grow our little community here of people who want to be Spirit-filled leaders. If you'd like to take a deeper step with us, you can go to spiritfilledleadership.com, spiritfilledleadership.com, to even enroll in one of our 30-day intensive programs to help you grow as a Spirit-filled leader. Okay, today's topic is knowing when to pivot. Knowing when to pivot. So when you set off to do something as a leader, part of what you're going to do is you're going to discern the end goal. Where do we want to get to? And part of that also is of course, recognizing where you are. So it's kind of like, this is where we are, and this is where I think we need to be. And this could be whether leadership in your marriage, with your family, with your business, with your church community. It's a sense of like, this is where we are. This is the current situation, and this is where I think we need to get to. This is where I think the Lord wants us to get to. And part of leadership is painting that picture clearly enough and helping generate enough kind of anxiety, proper anxiety, or kind of movement within us to say, where we are is not where we can't stay here. We need to go to that other place. I'm going to paint a picture for where we need to get to, the promised land, so to speak, but also show that we can't stay in the desert. We need to make the journey towards the promised land and why that's important. But what we find often is that process of like A to B, here to there, is never that simple. It hardly ever works where it's like, yeah, this is where we are, this is where we need to get to, and it's a straight line. A leads straight to B. That doesn't tend to be the way it works. The way it tends to work is A starts to go towards B, but really ends up at C. And this is actually a really good thing. That if we end up at the exact place we thought we needed to when we started the journey, in the course of leadership, in the course of purifying a community, in the course of our parishes or whatever, we're probably not at the best version of that, because the information we have when we first get started is not the fullness of what we will need and what we will learn along the path. That as we set out for B, and we need to discern that as clearly as possible and receive from the Lord, where do you want us to go, and what should that look like, and what is your dream for us? As we set out for that, we absolutely want to have conviction around it and clarity about where we're headed. But we need to be open to the Spirit so that along the way, we learn from the mistakes, we're continuing to gather more information, so that the ultimate destination, C, is the purest form of God's desire for our family, for our relationship, for whatever we're leading. That A to B doesn't tend to be the case. It's actually A heading towards B ends up at C. And along that path are going to be these sometimes little, but sometimes dramatic pivot moments where a mission has been given us, a vision has been given us, and we start to live in and through that mission and vision. And we realize that in order to more fully accomplish it, to be the purest form of it, things need to change. Sometimes in very dramatic ways and sometimes in less dramatic ways. And we see this in the business world all the time. You know, a classic example of this is Slack, the the team networking tool, the communication tool that many organizations use, was originally a video game. It was actually called Glitch. And they built this whole communication system within Glitch so that the players of the game could interact with each other and share documents and do the whole thing. And Glitch wasn't working as a video game. But they realized that the communication tool that they had built, this team environment, worked really well for helping an organization function and function at a high level. And out of that, Slack was born. Another example was YouTube was originally a site for dating, to upload videos about yourself in order to get a date, to try to enter into a relationship with somebody. Now I think it's the #2 search engine in the world just to learn information. I mean, it's one of the top 5 biggest websites in the world for a variety of things, from media and content, all that. But it started as a dating site. Somewhere along the line, the leaders of it realized there's something here. What they set out to do was build connection, a dating site, and the fuller expression of that created this environment, this community of sharing all forms of expression. Glitch was trying to create a video game where people could really interact with each other. That was a beautiful vision. And what did it turn into? Slack, which is this incredible tool for people to interact with each other on a team. You see this in the church all the time. There's all of our great saints. When you dive into their story, they catch a vision from the Lord to serve the poor like Mother Teresa. But along the way, there are these pivots of, I thought I was going this way to fulfill this mission, and now I'm kind of going this way. St. Ignatius of Loyola, St. Francis of Assisi. You just go down the line. There are all these saints who set out because the Lord is calling them into something, and as they step into it, they pay attention to what the Spirit is doing. They're sensitive to what has changed. They're gathering information. They're learning from their failure. They're growing from their success, and where they end up is a new place. There have been pivots along the way. So I want to give you 4 kind of tips for how to know when it's time to pivot. And these are not like canonical in the sense of like, there's no way I can just kind of map out in each individual one of your situations the exact time when a pivot is necessary. But I've seen that, generally speaking, when a pivot is from the Lord, when there's a course correction that He's giving, when there's a more pure version of what He's calling us into, very often these 4 things are present. So the first thing is this. The time to pivot is not generally when you are personally or organizationally in a valley, like deep in a valley. Or, to loosely say something like a dark night of the soul, or, a desolation period, that Ignatius of Loyola would talk about, this time of desolation, is not generally the time to make dramatic pivots to relationships or to organizations or to groups that you're leading. Even Ignatius would say that when you find yourself in a time of desolation, the time is not to make big changes, it's actually to double down on the things you know you're called to do. So when you find yourself in a valley, the temptation could be, it's time to pivot because it's not working, I'm not feeling it, I'm blah, blah, blah. But actually in those times, it's time to double down, to do more of the things you know you for sure are called to do. You know for sure this is going to make you and keep you connected to the Lord and make you a better disciple. Now, the time to pivot, though, often is as you're emerging out of the valley and you're in that space of, I've learned something from this experience. As you start to come out of the valley, as the time of desolation starts to be lifted, that is a great time to then take stock and say, okay, I still remember what the valley felt like. What did we learn from that? What was the Lord trying to teach us in that moment? And now how do I apply those lessons to this new environment, this new opportunity, as I'm starting to peek out of the valley and see now where the sun is and how to follow it? So don't make pivots generally when you're in the valley, but be prepared to potentially make pivots as you come out of the valley. So you want to learn from it, but you want to wait until you're on the rise. Second tip is, generally, pivots are going to involve not just your own decision, but key stakeholders also coming into agreement with it. Now, not every pivot is that way. Sometimes in order to lead, you have to make a decision that is not entirely popular with the other people who have really bought in. Sometimes a pivot is going to be very dramatic for the relationships and the people who have given a lot to get to a certain point, that they're going to be like, there might even be some rupture around it. And of course, any rupture should always be born from what you can handle out of you living virtuously and doing the right thing. You can't help how people respond all the time. You can't take on the burden of what's going on in their life in all circumstances. But generally speaking, a good pivot is going to come when a leader says, I think something needs to change, and as they propose that change, the key stakeholders come into agreement with it. You'll actually know that you may not be in a completely healthy environment or a completely healthy team if when pivots are proposed, they're immediately shot down. Or if they're immediately like discarded as like, oh, there goes that person again. They're just disenchanted with the current thing. They don't have discipline or whatever. Pivots that are born out of the heart of God, course corrections that are born out of the heart of God, certainly will cause people to make decision points, but should bring about consensus with those who are purely desiring to do the Lord's will. Again, this is a messy process, and it's not always the case like this, but I'm just giving you some kind of key things to look at, that as you're discerning a pivot, finding buy-in from the key stakeholders is a really good thing to aspire to and a really good thing to pay attention to. The third thing to keep in mind with a pivot is very rarely will a pivot, a course correction, be completely detached from the mission that the Lord had placed on your heart at the beginning. That wherever you are A, and wherever he seems to be calling you to go to B, it's really rare that C would actually be more like X. Like completely, or more like, instead of not even being on the alphabet anymore, like a number, right? This is where the analogy is breaking down. But the point being, like most pivots are going to be just a purifying of the initial heartbreak, or the, maybe not purifying, but more of a greater clarity around how to live out the heartbreak and the mission that the Lord has placed on you. Now, there will be times when the Lord's going to maybe personally say, okay, you were on this course, you were working in a parish, and now I want you to work in the public sphere or whatever. Those are a little different. I'm talking about kind of organizationally as you're trying to live out the mission that the Lord's given you, as live out the mission of the parish or live out the mission of your family or whatever. Very rarely will the pivot be so dramatic that it's completely detached from the original vision and mission. So if you find yourself kind of being drawn to that, that would take even greater discernment to know, is this actually of the Lord, or is this something deep within me that's responding to the current moment? So that's number 3. Most of the time, pivots are connected to the original idea or mission, but with the greater clarity or greater purity. And then finally, tip number 4, when you're discerning a pivot, is just spend a lot of time listening to the Holy Spirit in those times. You just want to come to Him with great humility to say, Lord, purify me so that whatever decision I'm making in these moments are born out of a genuine humility and desire to be obedient to what you have for us. Not my own wounding, not my own pride, not my own kind of aspirations and goals, but truly in your heart. So you need to listen, but then as we've talked about before, you need to be bold. Pivots require courage. To course correct something, to recognize that where we're going is not exactly where we should continue to go, requires courage, requires boldness. And this is again where the Holy Spirit comes in, to allow the Holy Spirit to give you the fortitude and the courage to respond to the moment and to do the right thing, to live virtuously, to receive from the Lord His new vision, His new calling, or His purified vision and calling, and say yes to it, is the work of the Spirit in us. So in times when you start to feel like maybe a pivot is coming, more time before the Lord, more time asking for more of the Holy Spirit, more time saying, come Holy Spirit, fill me, more time giving permission to the Spirit is an incredibly fruitful course of action for you. So, recap, a couple of things to keep in mind with pivots. Number 1, generally speaking, don't pivot when you're emerging out of the valley. Number 2, seek key stakeholder buy-in. Number 3, remain connected to the original idea or vision. And number 4, respond to the Holy Spirit with great sensitivity. Of course, as I was describing all of these, you can see there are examples where this is not exactly how it's going to go. But the main thing I want to impress upon you in this episode is as you start to say, this is where we are and this is where we need to go, expect that where you end up will not be exactly where you thought you would, but as long as you're connected to the Lord, you're leading with courage, you're responding to the Spirit, you can be confident that where you end up is exactly where the Lord wants you to be. God bless you.